Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Henry Wilson. I'm the Project Futures Network lead for the London region, and wanted to just say another huge thanks for joining us today at the NHS Project Futures Compass O2 event. I hope you've enjoyed the session so far, and you're in for another treat very shortly. But just before I hand over to Rachel Jenkins for the session Be Your Own Coach, just a quick reminder of the format in case you this is the first session that you've joined today. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a panel with some tabs. There's a chat tab where you can put in some thoughts and comments. There's a Q&A tab. So if you've got any questions for Rachel, pop them into that tab and we will then moderate them and people will get a chance to vote on them. And at the end, we will have plenty of time for questions. Rachel would love this to be an interactive session, so please don't be shy. There are a few polls, so Rachel will be posing you a few questions. You can put your response and submit your response so we can see how everyone is feeling about coaching. And just finally, hopefully you also all saw the code for being prompt and to the session on time. We will then have the end of session code when we wrap up. Now I'm going to introduce you to Rachel. So Rachel has worked in project and program management for over 25 years, mostly within the NHS and the education sector. As well as her current PMO role, she also leads on project management capability development for Nottingham and Nottinghamshire ICS PMO. She's the Coaching and Mentoring Workstream lead for NHS Project Futures, and she writes Coaching Corner for the Project Futures Update newsletter. A qualified executive and leadership coach and mentor, Rachel is passionate about the role that coaching and mentoring can play in developing people's confidence and capability to achieve their potential. She lives in Nottingham with her husband and loves to ski whenever they can escape to the mountains. Doesn't that sound marvellous? Fingers crossed for the ski season this coming year. So without further ado, Rachel, it's over to you and your session, Be Your Own Coach.
Hi, thank you, Henry, and hello, welcome to everyone that's joined me for this session. I appreciate you taking the time out to be with me while I talk about some of the ways in which you can become your own coach. I've talked before in previous network sessions, maybe you came along at Compass 2, where I've talked about how you can access the coaching offer through the NHS Leadership Academy. But beyond that, there's a free offer for people that work in the NHS. It can be quite difficult to access and find coaching. Cost and time commitment can be barriers, but there is an awful lot that you can do to kind of coach yourself. And I often get an astute question along the lines of, well, isn't that the same as personal development, Rachel? And it kind of is, but there are some similarities and some differences. But, you know, there's a lot that you can do to develop your own practice and your own skills. So just to start off with, I just wanted to get a bit of a feel for how many of you here have actually accessed some coaching before. So if you would just like to click on the poll button over on the right hand side of your screen, we have a poll in there for you, just asking you, have you ever had any formal coaching? So do you want to click over there, and then Henry will let me know when we start to get some results coming through. So there's lots of different ways that you can access your formal coaching. Like I say, there's the Leadership Academy offer, the professional bodies offer coaching. Some organisations have coaching offers through their OD and HR departments, but quite often people have to pay to go and work with a coach who's working as an independent business. So you can see there we've got a bit of moving up and down going. Can we see that, Henry, or is it just me can see that?
Yes, it's coming through. So
brilliant.
At the moment, about 45% of people have had coaching and 55 not.
So yeah, that's quite interesting, actually. I wasn't sure how many people would want to come along having already experienced coaching, so that's actually quite nice, you know, to know that we've got some people along. So I have a second question. So those of you that have had coaching, if you would now like to do the next poll for me, which is a sliding scale of 1 to 10, because I'm interested to know how useful you found it. and we'll see what comes through. If anyone has read my column in the last update newsletter, I did talk about how coaching can be challenging, and sometimes you don't find that click with your coach, and it's absolutely fine to find a coach that you can work with, who shares your values, who wants to work with you in a way that you find helpful and useful. But if coaching has been built properly, which in most cases it has, and it's all around you and it's about achieving your goals, then usually you come away from it, with something really useful, and welcome that challenge that you'll get from a coach. So it looks like we're sort of heading up. I'm squinting now at the screen, terrible. So are we on there about, Henry, 70-75%?
Yep, it's moving around a bit, but about 3/4 of people seem to be finding coaching useful.
Right, that is really good. Because something I've talked about before is sometimes people will go for coaching, not realizing that it's actually mentoring that they need. So if you set off wanting a mentor and you've got a coach, you may find that it's not giving you what you need. But many coaches can also offer some mentoring and blend it together for you, or know someone that you can go to get the mentoring that you're looking for. Okay, let's move on. So I'm going to talk to you, about how you can coach yourself, because I think some of the best coaching outcomes that we achieve as coaches and the breakthroughs that we can achieve for our clients is around self-awareness. So when you become more self-aware about how you are, how you interact with people, how you are generally in different situations, your self-awareness very much changes how you interact with other people. You can also appreciate another person's difference, their perspective, and increases your understanding of the situation. I was very interested in Gordon's triangle this morning, where it was very much talking about situational awareness and insight. And I promised that I hadn't seen Gordon's slides before I wrote mine, but this very much sits in that corner of the triangle, very much about insight about yourself and sort of understanding what is going on. And I think the main thing, if you want to coach yourself, is you have to be curious. If you aren't curious about yourself, or how you come over, or wanting to improve, then I think you will find self-coaching quite difficult. So let's start and have a think about some of the ways in which you can decide if it's good for you and if it's going to work for you. So one of the things that we talk about initially is sort of understanding yourself and how do you like to learn. There's lots of different learning styles. If you've ever done teacher training, and of course I come from the education sector, so I love a matrix of learning styles. There are different ones out there. So there's lots of different styles. Make my slides work. There we go. So there's different ways and different things you can look at, and you may recognize yourself. So are you very practical? Are you hands-on? Are you a doer? Do you like to get in there and have a go? Are you a listener? Do you want people to explain it to you? Do you find the diagrams, instructions, demos only go so far? You actually need to listen to someone talking you through something. Are you an avid reader? Are you a knowledge gatherer? Do you like to sort of have a bit of a, the more you learn, the more confident you feel about something? Or are you visual? Visual people are very much, stop talking and show me the diagram. That for them it's all about that visual picture and how you simulate that. It could be diagrams, it could be tables, it can be all sorts of things. You're not usually exclusively one. You've got a few kind of learning styles in there, but I think sometimes knowing having a feel for what your learning style is will really help you. So say, for example, if you're a listener, you're going to find podcasts pretty good, because that is all about listening. You're going to like audiobooks, sort of things like that. If you're visual, you will probably want to watch a YouTube video, or that sort of thing. And if you're practical, it's more about translating what you're learning into practice and actually having a go in the workspace. But there's another way around sort of learning. There's lots of different models, and there's another model that talks about people that if they call practical stuff pragmatist, they call people activists as well. They're always asking questions, what's this, what's that, what's that mean, how do I make sense of that? And within that model, there's very much people who are thinkers and reflectors. And if you are a reflector, as in you're one of those people that likes to go away after an event and think about, I could have handled that a bit differently, or I could have, not risen to that, or I could have said that a little bit differently, or I could have done. You very much like reflecting, and if you like reflecting, reflective practice can be, something that will really, really help you. So reflective practice is about after the event. There's several models out there. I mean, get on Google and have a look and see what you think, what you find that's going to suit you. But one thing they all have in common is that they encourage a reflective way of thinking practice, and that's how you learn. Obviously, it sounds quite obvious to say it, but it does happen after the event. And the key thing, I think, to get the most out of it is you've got to be honest with yourself. There's no point doing a reflection if you've got to find that middle ground though. It's no good being hard on yourself and everything that goes wrong is your fault naturally, etc. But then on the other end of the spectrum, there's no point doing reflective practice if you think you don't have anything to learn and you can't change anything. But you need that honesty with yourself. You need to be able to look back at what happened and, look at where you could have done better, honestly, look at how, actually that bit that you did was okay. You can write it in a journal, or you can discuss it with a peer. So I first got into reflective practice when I was a teacher, because part of our professional development, you had to keep a professional development journal. So I just had this notebook and I just used to write down, reflective practices. I'll take you through a cycle in a minute. And then latterly, when I came back into the NHS, it's something that I've always done through supervision. So I like to encourage people that work in my teams, that's part of our monthly one-to-one, monthly supervision. We have a bit of reflective practice where, I encourage them to go through something that's happened that month, that either went well or maybe not so well. Encourage them to really think through that reflective thinking. I also had a bit of a chat with my own line manager last week and said that I would actually quite like to do it with her in my reflection. So you can write it, you can talk about it, so you can usually find a way to make it work for you. But try and do it sooner rather than later. If you are going to talk it through with someone, maybe jot down some notes so that it's, sort of pretty fresh in your memory. So my reflective practice cycle of choice, and as I say, there are several, is Gibbs. So you basically start at the top and you can have different sections within a book. You can, just jot some notes down. You could even, just have a print off of a Gibbs reflective cycle and just write some keywords next to each section, just to remind you of what it is that you want to think about. So your description about what happened, at this point, it's important to sort of be quite functional about it. I was in a meeting, such and such was happening. I, was trying to make my point, but I didn't feel I couldn't get my opportunity to speak. And then in the end, I just thought, oh, no one's interested in what I had to say. And, so get your description in. Then think about your feelings, what was happening, what were you thinking, what were you feeling, your anxiety, frustration, because I can't get a word in edgeways. Evaluation, what was good and bad about the experience, which kind of does go push on a little bit from the feelings. But description is the bit that most people find a little bit difficult in Gibbs. What sense can you make of the situation? And that's about looking a little bit wider than yourself as well. Were there ways other people were behaving that was having a knock-on effect for yourself? Knowing your own triggers and buttons getting pushed is also quite helpful in terms of self-awareness. So with a certain behaviours playing out, with the politics playing out, etc. So then you think about, what could I have done? Could I have done something, a bit differently? Could I have said something different? Could I have taken an opportunity, etc. And then your action plan is if this throws again, what am I going to do? What am I going to do differently in that situation? Like I say, from a self-reflective practice, you can learn a lot from that. You can go a long way, and having discussions with peers or with your line manager, they can sort of push those questions kind of back at you. And in a coaching scenario, that's sort of pretty much the questions that I would be asking someone as I encourage them to describe to me a situation that they struggled with or found difficult. So, that's exactly there, being able to work that through for yourself. So one of the other things I wanted to talk today, because I haven't really got a huge amount of time and I could talk to you all afternoon about this, so is particularly around resilience. Obviously, it's something that's been huge at any time in our working lives. But obviously recently, in the last 18 months or so, we've had to draw on huge amounts of resilience. And resilience is very, very important in, sort of motivation, wanting to learn, caring about what you're doing, all of those things. And I want to introduce you to a concept that I've come across a few times over the years, which is the reservoir of resilience. And anyone who has done any online resilience training, or maybe done some training in your own organizations about, your own resilience or building resilient teams, you may have come across the reservoir of resilience. So the concept of the reservoir of resilience is that it has water goes in, water goes out. Very obvious, very basic. But it encourages you to think about where water comes out. What are the things that drain your reservoir of resilience? Where are those cracks in the dam? What is is it certain people who you find quite difficult? Is it certain pieces of work, or does the thought of doing a presentation or leading a discussion or a debate, does that stress and anxiety of that start to drain your reservoir? Because you've also got all the feeders coming in. You've got your rivers, you've got your streams, and they will all be the different things that build your resilience. And that's all about the balance. So I've got a diagram here that I've put, shamelessly stole this from Lloyds Bank, but they did put it out on Google, so fair enough. You can use this, and I've put this slide in separately in the resources if you wanted to print it off and use it. So that's the concept there. So you can see that you've got your huge cracks in the dam at the bottom. What's draining your resilience? What's dropping that level? And then at the top, what do you do to feed it? So there can be lots of things that you do to feed your resilience. It can be just things that are important for your work-life balance, getting out for that walk, a bit of a book, seeing friends now that we can actually go out and be a bit more sociable, some exercise. That now is no longer something that you tend to have to do on your own. You can go back and do some group exercise. I've been really happy that we've been starting to be able to go and play tennis again and things like that. I can tell I haven't played in 18 months, but it's good to be back out there for that social aspect. And in terms of managing that balance, it's be aware of these drains on your resilience. The particular meetings coming up this week that you're thinking, oh, it's going to be really hard because so and so's there and they give me a hard time, or I've got to present something to project board and they're not going to like it, and but I've really got to get my case over. All those things, and pre-fill your reservoir, if you like. Top it up a little bit. Sleep is very, very important for resilience, but people write whole books on how to get good sleep, so I'm not going to sort of go into that. But there are lots and lots of things, aside from sort of your general healthy life. Learning some coping mechanisms, going back to that reflective journal, that reflective practice that you did about the last time you were in that particular scenario, and thinking, right, okay, I said that if that happens again, I'm going to try and do this. And it helps to make you feel a little bit more in control of the situation as well, because feeling out of control can be a massive drain on resilience. So sort of to finish up really, before we sort of start to hopefully move on to some questions, I put lots of different resources, some of my favourites further down the screen that you can see. So I've mentioned a few books that you might be interested in if you like to, sort of read books. I've focused very much on, sorry, my notes got stuck. I focused very much on sort of books that you can work through and sort of under your own steam, but very much books as well that when you have that skill for yourself, it's something that you can transfer to your team as well. So you can start to take a coaching approach in your project management leadership. You can take a coaching approach in your day-to-day sort of leadership role with your team. Anything that works for you from a coaching perspective, you can be pretty sure that most of your team are going to appreciate it as well. And I know for a fact that, one of my previous teams was delighted when I came bouncing back from the Reservoir of Resilience seminar and started talking about, right, okay, so as a team, what's draining our resilience, and talking through it with them. So lots of resources out there. And so obviously Atomic Habits, got to mention that because that's my book of the month at the moment from the last update. So you'll be pleased to know there's a new update column at the end of September, and there'll be a new book. So you'll stop banging on about Atomic Habits. But I do think it is such a good book. Makes, some of those habits that you might want to be building around resilience so much more accessible. Also popped in the resources section a template that sort of fits some of the notions that James Clear uses in his book about not thinking about kind of, what you want to achieve, but thinking about the person that you are and sort of identifying yourself. So I've had to start thinking now, skiing probably, hopefully will happen this season. I'm very unfit, I'm very out of condition, and I need to get off my bum and start doing my training every day. And he's actually been right in that I've been putting it off for like 2 weeks because I know it's going to hurt, and it's going to hurt a lot at the beginning as I get fitter again. But I've switched my mindset and I've thought, right, I'm a skier, I'm going on holiday and I'm going to ski. So, and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z exercises every day to help me be a better skier. And to some extent he's right, just changing that mindset. It's become less of a chore of, oh God, I've got to do 25 dead bugs today and 40 squats and etc., to thinking, right, got to get better so I'm a better skier on my holiday. And it's made it a lot easier from a motivation perspective. And then the other bit that I've popped down in the resources is an Excel spreadsheet that I've taken from his website, which talks about different things. So it helps you think about how you create that identity. It was one of the key questions I think most asked that was coming back from the book review, and people saying, I'm actually quite struggling with this concept of, thinking of myself as I am, rather than what it is that I'm trying to do. So there's lots and lots of ideas in there about different ways that you can reframe that thinking that, might help you get going. I didn't realise that was what I was doing at the time, but 1st of October this year, I'll be coming up to having quit smoking for 2 years. And I think the big thing that made a difference for me was I didn't think about, I need to, stop smoking and do whatever. I thought of myself as I don't smoke anymore, I'm not a smoker. And that mindset shift, has helped a few times along the way where I've had, those sort of weaknesses. So it's something that I can say that works for me, and it works for everybody, but it's worth a try. There's lots of stuff out there, lots of resources that you can get, different websites. If someone writes a good book, you can, I don't know, put whatever bet on it you like that they've got a website somewhere that backs up that book. Obviously, other books. I quite like Mark Manson. I'm not going to read out his book title just in case somebody kind of cuts me off because I've break some firewall or something. But excellent book, very forthright, very upfront. And if you like someone really telling it how it is and making you sit up and think, oh yeah, I do that, then really good book, very good website. James Clear also has lots of materials on his website that kind of link to the book. TED, of course, had to mention TED, didn't I? So, TED Talks, go along and have a look. You can sign up for all sorts of things on TED. You can tick a load of boxes about your interests. And it's really, really interesting just to hear some of the talks that come along. And reflective practice can be very useful for sort of all of those things as well, is that you think about what did I hear in that? What have I heard that I think, oh, actually, that would actually be really useful, or I could change that. And how could I do something differently at work, or, how could I take a different approach with X person or certain situations? How could I be more assertive? So do a bit of reflective practice about what you've read, what you've heard, what you've seen. Another podcast that I particularly like is Feel Better, Live More, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. I often listen, he does weekly ones, and I often listen to what he's saying. He takes a really, really, truly holistic approach to well-being, and he gets some amazing guests on, that have lived incredible lives and have, lots of things to learn from. See, things that you'll see on TV. So of course, got to put Gareth Southgate on there, haven't I? Because huge interest, particularly around about him as a leader, about how he was sort of almost beyond the England manager. He's a leader, and what is it that's different about him? And there's all sorts of critical pieces being read. Matthew Syed, who writes Rebel Thinking, he wrote an article for the BBC, and he was very much sort of saying about He is very different to his panel of advisors who support him. He hasn't surrounded himself with a load of football people who only know about football, and that's not an offense, that's no offense intended, but that's their expertise. He has advisors from rugby, from other high elite sports, because they will look at performance in sports from a slightly different lens and a slightly different perspective, and they challenge his thinking, and he really kind of appreciates that as a way to learn. We've got our professional bodies, how to PMO, the APM, lots of things going on there, where you can get into forums, into discussions, Twitter, which I'm not quite so good at, but I do kind of follow everyone who tweets from here, and I just, I'm always impressed that people manage to tweet. I always think I've never got anything to say. And then LinkedIn. Lots and lots of stuff going on in LinkedIn. Obviously, we've got Project Futures on there that you can follow. And I've started to get a little bit better. So I am hoping to post more on my page and through Project Futures to, to follow on from this theme so that people can, do a bit more around coaching themselves. So I haven't really had a huge amount of time to run through a lot of stuff, but those were kind of, I felt at the moment, maybe the couple of the most useful things around, do some reflective practice. Again, that's something you can do with your teams, and that importance of resilience, because that underlying resilience makes a difference, as we all know, in everything. It drives your motivation, it drives your energy levels, it's, affects your ability to learn. If you're tired, it's hard to reflect. If you're tired, it's hard to prepare, to be focused, to have ideas, be creative. So it's such an important thing. And again, if you can coach yourself around that, think what you can do for your team and your project teams, if you can do that as well. As I say, I've added some extra resources on. So this is a book, put it up in front of my face now. It's called Try Not to Make It Reflect on the Window. Not sure if I'm managing it, maybe not. It's listed below anyway. It's called Resilient. It's by Rick Hanson, and it's a very good step-by-step, chunk-by-chunk approach to resilience, and it breaks resilience down into different sort of elements and different influences, so you can find the bit that matters to you at the moment. And then I also mentioned a book called Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Erikson. It's becoming very popular these days, but this book is very much based around what colour are you? So red people, yellow people, green people, blue people. And it helps you identify which one of those you are. And then it gives you real insight into, if, say, for example, I'm a yellow person, surprise, surprise, always bouncing around, lots of energy, very extrovert, etc., etc. And blues find me really hard to get along with, because they are more introverts and a lot more sort of thoughtful and, introspective, and, and me bouncing around making a load of noise and throwing ideas everywhere really winds them up. So, but knowing when I'm working with someone who is blue helps me moderate sort of my behavior and how I'm coming over, so that we can get the best out of each other. And there was a quote that I was going to put up, but I didn't, but I do think it's probably quite pertinent. It's very often said, you can't change how other people behave, but you can only change how you respond to it or how you behave. And that is true, in my opinion. This is only my opinion to an extent, because I think you can influence other people's behavior, and you can do that by modifying and being aware of yourself and how you respond to them. Maybe you're pushing their buttons in a certain way. Maybe the language that you decide to use or the way that you try and come over just doesn't work for them. So if you can find a bit more of a middle ground, you can influence the relationship and how the two of you kind of get along. So I do think, whilst you can't, change somebody's personality, I think you can influence the way that you work together, and you can influence how well you do get along together. And so resources, bits and pieces underneath. I am going to put some more stuff up on K-Hub. I'm going to be a little bit more proactive with that coaching and mentoring area. I'll upload some more things. Also really happy for people to drop questions into K-Hub, maybe into the book review, or through my links. Didn't want to get there first, so through my LinkedIn, which also I'm trying a bit harder to be more proactive on. So message me through LinkedIn. My email address will be available somewhere, I'm sure, in one of the boxes. I do try and get back to people sort of quite quickly. I'm, like I say, very, very passionate about people being able to access coaching, and because you have neither the time or potentially the finances to access, some incredible high-level leadership, coaching expert, that doesn't mean, that the resources are not out there. And I'm always really happy to sort of try and help and advise and, try and answer questions, wherever I can. So it's a bit of a short and sweet session. So I hope there's some questions lining up there, Henry, as I'm going to have to talk about another book that I've got down here to fill the space. So, but before we move on to any questions that you might have, there's the poll again that I quickly flipped off just now. I'm interested to know how confident do you feel to have a go at some self-coaching, whether that's reflection, working on your resilience. So if you pop onto your poll button again, you'll find another of those sliding scales about how confident you feel to have a go. So if there's anyone there who is sort of feeling, sort of quite low, middling confident about it, and, there's something you're not sure if you're missing something, or you're not sure where to start, either ask a question now today in the session, or, contact me through LinkedIn or pop it onto K-Hub and I will try and get back to you. And any questions today, I'll also, pop up a bit more information about them on K-Hub as well. So how has it come back? So pretty good confidence, is at about 60%, around about thereabouts. So yeah, so that's quite optimistic, quite hopeful. It may be that you feel, that, self-coaching is something that maybe you're not able to kind of do by yourself. Grab a colleague, grab a peer, give yourself, some time together just to, maybe run through reflective practice, to, talk through issues and kind of coach each other. It is really easy to do, and you can have a really, it can help to generate positive working relationships as well. Okay, so I think that's probably everyone's voted who it's going to. So, and I just finally wanted to say, before hopefully we have some questions, is just give it a try. Do what works for you. Everything works differently for people, and just as if you went to see a coach would build it around your own goals and make it very tailored to you. You're the perfect person to tailor it to yourself, because you know exactly what you want and exactly what you're looking for. Get out there, use those resources, have a bit of reflective thinking, challenge yourself a little bit, talk to other people about, how they see that you come across, and take that away and think about, okay, do I like that? Do I not like that? How might I, change that a little bit? Ultimately, do what works for you, and stay curious. Just, keep learning, keep wanting to be self-aware. I think that's probably all I've got to say. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Brilliant. Rachel, thank you so much. That was really, really inspiring and illuminating. And it's really interesting because at the beginning, the majority of people, about 55%, said that they don't currently have a coach. And it's really great that you've given people some practical steps, how they can, start thinking about how they can use some of these techniques to coach themselves. And from the reflective practice to drawing inspiration from the world around them, which is absolutely fantastic. And there's been a few questions come through, but actually the first couple are related. The first one is, are there any courses that you would recommend to learn coaching skills, and what practical steps can you take to start coaching others? So this is a little bit more about perhaps people thinking about members of their team or people around them who they would like to, support with coaching. And so I don't know if you would like to respond to that. So how can people start learning coaching skills themselves?
So I would say probably the easiest way to start is to go and see what your local leadership academy offers. As I said before, there's the National Leadership Academy, and then there's all the regional ones as well. I do know my own in Midlands, they frequently run a 1, sometimes 2-day course for different levels about how to be a coach, as a manager, and as a leader. So that's really, really good place to go to get some skills. Obviously, because it's Leadership Academy, it's free, but that means often it's sort of quite oversubscribed. In terms of outside of that, I think you would just sort of be having to look for courses in different places. So I'm not sure of any that off the top of my head. I would always say go to the Leadership Academy first and see sort of how you get on.
Excellent, brilliant. So the Leadership Academy, that's fantastic. And then someone has also asked, how do I get involved in the Coaching and Mentoring Workstream?
Excellent, because this is going to be one of my final bits. You just basically either pop your details in here or give your details, email into the Project Futures email, just say you want to be part of it, because I am looking for people to help me with the work. We've got a lot to do to understand what the offer is out there, what the need is, what's that gap, how do we fill it? And it's more than just coaching, it's also the mentoring as well, which is just as important. So pop something in the comments or drop an email into Christine via the Project Futures. Hopefully Christine or somebody will pop my email address, my NHS one, into the chat. So drop me an email. I'm actually on holiday at the moment, won't be back until the 20th of September. So if you don't get a response straight away, I'm not ignoring you, I'm just having a bit of a holiday. Again, LinkedIn, K-Hub, we'll be doing a lot of the workstream stuff on K-Hub so that people can see what's going on and dip in and out of it. But thank you for offering. I'm very much grateful to take you up on your offer.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully people will be banging down your door soon. So thank you. And if anyone does get involved, we really, really appreciate it. Another question has just come in. It said, would you speak a little more about how to be more curious? So perhaps talk about that, because I know that was quite an important aspect of being your own coach.
So being curious, I think it's about being curious about yourself, being self-aware, how you work. So things, and some of the things I've said, thinking about, what's your learning style? What's your communication style? How do you come across? Is it how you think you do? Would you say you're assertive, or sometimes can you be a little bit aggressive, thinking you're being assertive? Being curious is wanting to be self-aware and wanting to understand you and how you work, what motivates you, what influences you as well, whether that's positive things that influence you, to recognizing other people's behavior that might be triggers, that you just, because we all have them, there will all be people that we've worked with or had in our lives in the past, that someone comes along and behaves a little bit similarly and they're pressing a button that you may not actually be aware of. So staying curious, reflect, think, talk. It's not everybody's thing to read books, which is why I've put some podcasts down, TED Talks, websites. Go to sort of whatever formats you feel an affinity with to find information. Get involved in networks, through the corporate membership of the APM. Join some of the special interest groups, join some of the regional events. Talk to people who are doing the role that you aspire to, or maybe in your peer group. Things like in-house PMO as well. And just be open to spotting those opportunities. And that's probably the longest definition you've ever heard for a single word, but it's huge. But I hope that sort of helps I sort of understand a little bit more about ideas to stay curious, keep asking questions.
I think really, really important. It goes back to the slide you had on your own learning style. Mm-hmm. So what floats your boat? What keeps you interested? And perhaps not. Sometimes I think you can beat yourself up if you say, well, I don't read enough, or I don't have enough time to do this. It's the way you were emphasizing. It's key to find the things that appeal most to your learning style, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, that was hopefully pretty much the point I was trying to make, that everybody has their own way, what they find interesting. I'm absolutely rubbish with audiobooks because I can't concentrate on them, because I'm not an auditory learner. I used to try and listen to them on the bus, but I'd spend more time sort of people watching out of the bus, than actually, and I'd think, oh, missed a chapter of that. What were they on about? Because it's not how my brain works, and that's absolutely fine. I should say, Henry, find the thing that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Another question. Would you suggest, this is a really good one, would you suggest that if you wanted coaching in a specific area, that you'd need to identify a coach who is the subject matter expert in that field, i.e. project management?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So lots of debate kicks off around this. So any coach should be able to coach anybody, because it's about who you are as a person, and it's about sort of challenging the way that maybe they perceive themselves, or the way that they sort of interact with people, or the way they think about themselves, or about confidence and so on. So most coaching courses, including the one that I did, they have a module around, how do you coach technical experts? Because you can coach anybody. Quite often when people want to be coached in something, so for example in project management, I'll often get people come into me and they're like, oh, I'm really glad I found a coaching, coaches in project management. And to some extent I think there's less explanation needed, because I understand how project environments are different. I understand how some of the dynamics work. I totally get that matrix management actually is a thing, not a word, and what that means. But quite often those people have come to me really wanting project management. They're actually looking for mentoring. So I think it's quite important to be really clear. What are you looking for? You're looking for mentoring, which is someone's expertise, knowledge, guidance, a more sort of pastoral, sort of paternal type, maternal type relationship, versus coaching, where it's about, well, I'm really not sure, and I want someone to sort of kind of push me to think about what it is that I actually want. Or do you want a blend of the two? A lot of coaches, myself included, will do a blend of the two, but I think it's just important to be really clear about what it is that you're looking for, and make sure that the coach understands what you're looking for, and we're going to give you what you need. So I hope that helps. If I haven't, just pop another follow-up question in there and I'll try again.
Brilliant. And actually the coaching versus mentoring, I think it was Mike put a link to a resource where that is explained in a bit more detail. Yes. To follow that up.
I was going to say, I would imagine that's the video for the Leadership Academy, but absolutely recommend it. One of the best explanations of them I've ever seen, if you're not sure.
Yeah, it looks like it. It's www.leadershipacademy.nhs. And so Faith has asked a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, so reflective practice is very attractive, but I'm never sure which experience to really focus on first. Does this just get better with practice?
Absolutely, yeah. Like anything. So excuse me, just gonna have a quick drink. Absolutely. Like anything, it does get better with practice. I think one of the things that particularly I found, and a lot of people find when you start reflective practice, is trying to make it specific enough and hone it into one or two things, so that you end up reflecting on the entire meeting or the whole day or a whole project. And it is about sort of, honing in and nailing it down to those sort of couple of key things. And you can't really reflect in the detail that you need to if it's too broad and too wide. It becomes a huge task that you just get bored of before you complete it. So yes, you do, and it is something that comes with practice. And I'm happy, if you're not sure, just to contact me and just say, how do I kind of like frame this question? Sort of what sort of level of detail do I need to be at? And hopefully we can have a bit of sort of discussion on K-Hub as well, sort of around those things. But I hope that helps. If not, again, pop another question in and I'll try again for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. I reckon we've got time for two more quick questions. So there's one from Faith. So her question was, getting feedback seems important, but it isn't always easy to know who to approach to support you in doing this. Yeah. Do you give people a heads up and say you'll be inviting feedback after an event, presentation, etc.? So how do you engage people in giving you good feedback?
So obviously there's lots of ways of doing that. You could be doing it quite formally. Obviously there's going to be a feedback form on this at the end. I think it's often quite good to have someone, or with a bit of peer support, where you support each other. And have those conversations. It's quite good, I think, to identify almost a critical friend, if you like, who can help you talk through those things and give them a bit of a heads up before the event. But like you say, getting feedback can be quite difficult, and you need to be quite brave as well when you're not sure kind of what you're going to hear. But I think usually it's sort of a bit of a heads up, and then people can think about what they're going to say before you sort of pounce on them with it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it does take, you've got to have an open mindset, haven't you, and be courageous about feedback, because you want a balanced set of feedback, right?
Yeah.
you know, it's no good if just someone just says, oh, everything is absolutely brilliant. Say that won't really be the case, and B, you know, it's not going to help you over the longer run, but it can be hard, can't it, sometimes to hear a full spectrum of feedback. So that courage and bravery is really, really important. Cool. And so very quickly, someone last question said, you mentioned asking questions. I've read that open questions are key. Could you give me an example or two, please, of an open question?
How would you describe an open question? That's an open question. So it's easier to think maybe it's not a closed question. So a closed question is anything that the answer is yes or no. An open question is anything that means someone has to explain or describe something. So what did you think about? How have you found? Where would you go? What do you think? How would you do that? You know, questions that stimulate, you know, a bit more of response other than yes or no. So I hope that helps.
And so I'll finish the session with an open question, and I'd say that was an absolutely brilliant session, wasn't it?
That's Rachel? A closed question, Henry. Yes or no?
It would be a resounding yes. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for all the brilliant questions. And there's a whole load of resources and thinking to go with this session. And Rachel, thank you for your kind offers to follow up with people.
No problem.
And in particular, we'll look forward to engaging with colleagues further around this topic, and perhaps some people being involved in the work stream going forward as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Look forward to working with anyone who wants to join in.
Brilliant. So I think we should be getting the closing competition code. Great. So I'll say farewell. I hope everyone's looking forward to the next session, which begins in 15 minutes time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.